Hello and welcome to the Rabbi Rafi Mollot channel. I am Rabbi Rafi Mollot, everybody's Rebbi. Tonight, there's no class in particular, just an open discussion, preparing for our new series that'll be next week. I created a flyer, which I put on the WhatsApp, and I guess I'll be sending out to my other social media soon. We have in the studio Abigail, Tim Flanagan, and Cliff, and we have in the YouTube comment world B'nai Noach Hearts for Hashem. Good evening, Rabbi. I'm so happy to be here and excited about the upcoming study. Great to have you. We're excited as well. Sandy Bassi is here. Red Rosie, this is a student of mine. I won't reveal her true identity, but this is someone that I taught in middle school when I was like a first year teacher many moons ago. Okay, so tonight we begin with a question. I sent in the email that people are welcome to come with their questions. So I got already a question before the stream began. And Abigail, do you wanna say your question, or should I say your question?
Yeah, I'll have a go. I'm not sure if I'll ask the question as clearly as you might be able to put it. But it's just when I'd like to have an answer for when a Christian throws this scripture back at me, Isaiah 43, particularly from verse 18 onwards, where God says he's doing a new thing, and even now you can see it. And then he goes on to say, that he doesn't want sacrifices, and he's abandoned the Jewish people, or he's abandoned Jacob, I think it says. That's what it says in English anyway. So it's a pretty good argument for a Christian to say, oh, yes, well, Christianity's the thing, and the rest of it's all gone now. So, like, what is a good translation from the Hebrew, for example? And give me an answer. What can I come back with?
Okay, so we're gonna question the premise of your question. In other words, well, I guess let's try to steelman it before we go ahead and answer it. I'm trying to find. It's like very hard to see the text. I'm trying to find a good layout here to see the text. I brought it up on Safaria over here. Can I make it? Can I enlarge it? Let me see if I can enlarge this somehow. I don't know. That's pretty good. How does that look? Decent. So this is Isaiah 43. I know it's Hebrew, but what do you want from me? Let's put it in English also. We'll do Hebrew and English, okay? And you said verse 18. So, blah, blah, blah. Let's go to verse 18. All right. Now, what you'll notice about verse 18, and this goes to a little bit what we discussed before, is verse 18 is coming like in the middle of the chapter, right? And even the chapter breaks are not really Jewish, okay? The chapter breaks are a Christian invention, but I'll show you where the real breaks are. So here, like you see after verse 15, there's a little, if you see the Hebrew verse, and then there's the letter Samech with like brackets around it. So that indicates a break in the text, in the scroll, like a space, that there's a section break there. Here's another one. So there's a very short section, 14 and 15 of 2 verses. Like just going back to the beginning of the chapter, for example. There's no such break at the end of 42. So you see the break between 42 and 43 is artificial. That's first of all. But there is a break, say after verse, where would the first break be? After verse 10, there's a break. After verse 13, there's a break. After verse 15, there's a break. And then it goes from 16 all the way till 21, and then there's a break. Okay. So could we look at the whole bit here? from starting with 16. What do you say?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. Now I hate reading English the translation. I hate it. Komer Hashem. Okay, thus said God. That's fine. Hanosein bayom darech, who made a road through the sea. Okay, fine. Uvamayim azim nisiva, and a path through mighty waters. That's all fine, right? So what is it? First of all, what is it talking about? Why does it say that? Thus said God, the one who makes a path through the sea and through mighty waters. Whatever, a pathway. So, what is that a reference to?
The Exodus.
Exodus from Egypt. Okay, quite obviously. So we see that God here is being referred to as God of the Exodus. Golden Gun is here. He says, I was introduced to Rabbi Mollot from Tanakh Talk channel, which hosts Rabbi Singer and the #1 counter-Christian missionary. Meanwhile, I've been very happy with the Rabbi Mollot tackling Christian questions too. So Golden Gun makes the point. I'm not a counter missionary in the classical sense. I don't set out to go and combat missionaries. I teach Torah. It happens to be that the greatest counter missionary is the Torah itself. So I don't go out of my way to make arguments with Christians. I just teach Torah. But if you're going to ask me, what does it mean? Because a Christian told you otherwise, here I can close off this commentary here. So then, so I'll tell you. You know what I mean? Now that I close the commentary, we can make this a little larger, I think. Yeah. I don't how do I get rid of this? No, see, if I X that out, the whole thing closes up. Okay, Tanakh, I have to open it again. Isaiah, I don't even like looking at it in English. Okay, 43, let's go back to verse 16. It just, when I enlarge it, it also enlarges all the nonsense on the screen that I don't want to see. So I can't, there's so little room for the text now. It's super annoying. Okay. Is what it is. Okay. So, Benino Hearts for Hashem. Golden Gun, the same here. T Bishop is here. Live long and prosper. Okay. Fine. So God is being introduced as God of the Exodus. This is the God of the redemption of Israel. Okay. And then he says this is a little harder. Okay. Hamotzi rechev vasus. Now here, this is not a translation that I would sanction. Who destroyed chariots and horses. Now that's just inaccurate. Motzi does not mean destroy. Motzi means to bring forth. Okay. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Anyone who knows basic blessings, we bless God as Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the one who brings forth bread from the earth. So Hamotzi rechav vasus is the one who brings forth chariots and horses. Chayil ve'izuz, and all the mighty host. Not really. Chayil could be a host. Izuz could be might. So he brings forth chariots and horses and a great army, and Izuz means strength, but it's all kind of a reference to military strength. Okay. Yachtav yishkevu, they lay down. I give out this this translation, just awful. Okay, Yachtav means together. You notice the word together in the translation anywhere? No, they just deleted that word from the translation. Gewalt. Okay. Together, Yishkevu, they lay down. Okay, that part is true. Together they lay down. Yachtav Yishkevu. Bal Yakumu, to rise no more. Okay, Baal means not, Yakuma means they rise. So Baal Yakuma means to not rise. Together they lay down and they do not rise. Do'achu, okay, they were extinguished. Okay, that's fine. Ka pishta kavu, quenched like a wick. Now, pishta literally means flax. They were extinguished like flax. What does he say? Quenched? Not quenched, extinguished. These are synonym. Do'achu and kavu means to extinguish. Extinguished like flax. He says like a wick, maybe wicks were made of flax, but extinguished like flax. Okay, so what is this talking about now? He brings forth horses and chariots. Now you could say this is also Egypt, because we see the chariots of Egypt and the horses of Egypt and the army of Egypt, the mighty host of Egypt, if you will, are brought forth, and they're, destroyed in the water. They are they're laid down, meaning they're caused to die and not to rise again, and they're extinguished. Maybe that is like a reference to like the water that washes them out, like water extinguishes a fire. So that could be the language here. I can tolerate that. Now, in other words, without going into commentaries, different opinions of what this is a reference to, I think it can be a reference to Egypt as well. That's fine. We can go with that without making it more complicated. Okay, now we get to verse 18, the verse in question. Al tizkeru rishonos. Do not recall what happened of old. Okay, this is a very loose translation. Al tizkeru means do not remember. Rishonos means from the word rishon, meaning first. Rishonos, plural, means things that happened at first. Don't remember the things that happened at first. Vikadmonios al tisbonanu, or ponder what happened of yours. So kadmonios, for those who are in my class, my biblical Hebrew class, you remember that kedem, shorsh kedem means in the beginning. Kadmonios, kadmon means way back in the beginning, right? So, and that which happened in the beginning, al tisbonanu, don't give thought to it. Bina means contemplation. Don't contemplate that which was in the beginning. Okay. Now, Abigail, what did your Christian friend want to do with that verse?
I'm actually only anticipating what she would do with that verse. And I think it's one of the go-to verses for Christians when they say,
How do they
okay,
go
this
to
is,
it? What do they do with this verse?
oh, okay, that's Torah and everything Old Testament.
Okay, so
forget all the old stuff. It's all
right.
new
So
now.
where did they get that from? Where's the clue? I just referenced here for two verses, past events. No, three verses. No, two verses. 16 and 17. This thus says God, the God of the Exodus. He made a road through the sea. He brought the army of Egypt and he laid them down and extinguished them. Right? And then he goes and says, don't think of the things that happened in the beginning, which is a little bit ironic. You just reminded me of what happened in the beginning. And then you say, don't remember what happened in the beginning. Now, how you get from there to the Old Testament, I don't know, but okay. Let's see if that stands. Okay. But obviously that's a wild conjecture where there's nothing indicated in the context that this is talking about. Don't remember the Old Testament, right? But let's see if going forward, it sort of opens up and unlocks what is meant over here. And I think it's going to be abundantly clear, abundantly transparent. Isaiah's not hiding the ball. Okay. Let's look at verse 19. Hineni oseh chadasha. I'm about to do something new. Okay. Hine means behold, knees. Me, behold, I, oseh, am doing. Chadasha. Chadasha means new. Hineni oseh chadasha. Behold, I am doing something new. Ata titzmach. Again, you may know from the biblical Hebrew, ata, now, titzmach, it shall sprout. Here it says it shall come to pass. That's a terrible translation. Titzmach, the word semach, I have a whole class on this in my prayer series of when we talk about the prayer for Mashiach. As a matter of fact, it's called titzmach. Mashiach is called semach, the sprout. And the commentaries talk about the reason Mashiach is called the sprout is because Mashiach is a process that unfolds slowly, like the growth, like the natural growth of a plant. It isn't something sudden, which is actually a little ironic because here says Ata, now titzmach, now it will sprout. I speak a lot about this in that class. I suggest everyone go to my to the playlist tabs on my channel. go to the playlist for Pray Like You Mean It. Look for the class, maybe 15 classes in, whatever it is, that is called like all about Mashiach or Messiah, the Sprout of David, something like that. The title will give it away. And the class goes all into this. Why Mashiach is called a sprout, and why we find a dichotomy in the language of the prophets between this idea of Mashiach coming immediately versus the idea of Mashiach coming over the course of time. And it's a constant dichotomy in the language. And here is one of those examples of Ata Titzmach, now it will sprout. Now sounds immediate, and Titzmach is the natural growth of something over the course of time. So I suggest people look at that class. But even without that, let's just read on. Halo teida'uha. How does he translate that? Suddenly you shall perceive it. There's nothing sudden here in this verse at all. It's just not, the word sudden is not present. Ata is now. He says even now. There's no even here, but whatever. It doesn't say even. Ata, now, titzmach, not it will come to pass. It will sprout. Halo teida'uha. Halo is like behold, okay? Behold, like lo in English, L-O, lo, behold. Lo and behold, right? Halo teida'uha, you shall know it. It says you shall perceive it. No. Teida'uha, you shall know it. Behold, you shall know it. Af osim bamidbar derech. I shall even, this is me, I'm translating first now. I shall even put in the desert a path. I will make a road through the wilderness. Here's the word af, even. Here he puts it up here. I mean, he throws everything out of order in the verse, this translator. He's fired. Af osim bamidbar derech. I will even put a road through the wilderness. Fine. Bishimon Naharos, in the desolate place, rivers. What does he say? And rivers in the desert. Okay, fine. We'll accept that. Okay, so he's telling you what he's doing. He's telling you right now. He says, I'm going to put a path through the desert. I'm going to put rivers through the desolate wilderness. Right? What is that? What is that referring to? And what is it being compared to and contrasted to? Okay, so let's read on. I hope it's going to open up and become clear. Okay, it says, Tichabedeni chayas hasadeh, the wild beasts shall honor me. Correct. Tanim uvnos ya'ana, what does he say? Jackals and ostriches. Fine, we'll give it to him. Ki nasati vamidbar mayim, for I provide water in the wilderness. Fine. Nasati, I have provided, whatever. What in the wilderness water. Niharos bishimon, rivers in the desert, right? Good. Lehashkos ami v'chiri, to give drink to my nation, ami, to my nation, v'chiri, my chosen one. My chosen one. Okay? To give drink to my chosen people. All right. So something's happening. He says, I am the God of the Exodus. I'm the God that took you out of Egypt. I brought you through the sea. I destroyed your enemies there. But forget about all that. Forget about that. Something new is going to happen. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to make a new road through the desert. I'm going to make waters coming through such that the wild beasts of the desert will honor me, because I've put water in the desert. For what purpose? To give water to my nation, my chosen people. Here's the last verse before the break. Amzu yotzarta li. Amzu, this nation, yotzarti li. I have formed, shaped, molded, li, for me. Hila siyasa peru. They shall tell my praises. Okay. What is going on here? Any idea what is going on here? Before I tell you what I think is abundantly apparent, let me not presume. What do you get from these verses? Anyone?
I get that Mashiach is coming, but that's exactly what Christians latch onto.
It might be related just to a return from exile.
Okay, very good. You're both somewhat right. Okay, this is about redemption. This is about the redemption of the Jewish people. There was a redemption in the past, and God says there's going to be a redemption in the future. And the redemption in the future is going to be so wondrous that you will forget if you thought the redemption in the past was something, you ain't seen nothing. You ain't seen nothing yet, because what you're going to see in the future is going to dwarf that so much that you won't even remember it anymore. Now, just to show you that's not just Rabbi Mollot saying that, Rabbi Jeremiah says this in different words. So bear with me. I'm going to switch tabs over here. Okay. All right. You're with me. You can see Jeremiah now. You don't know what's in Hebrew. Let me put it in English for you guys. Okay. See if we can find it. Okay. Oh, very good. Here's the interesting, right? It says, she'll not say anymore. Yeah, this is it. Here, I found it. Okay. So again, you have a text break over here. And then Jeremiah 16, verse 14, it says, Lochein, therefore, Hinei yomim ba'im ne'um Hashem. Behold, days are coming. Behold, days are coming, said Hashem, assuredly. What's assuredly? Where does it get assuredly? I don't know. These people, they make up things. Lachein, therefore, Hine yamim ba'im. Behold, days are coming. Ne'um Hashem, says God. Okay. V'lo ye'amer od chai Hashem. It shall not be said anymore, has he translated, as God lives, Asher ha'elah as Bnei Yisrael miMitzrayim, who took the children of Israel, who took the Jewish, the children of Israel out of Egypt, who brought the Israelites out of Egypt. It's not going to be said anymore. God is the one who took the Jews out of Egypt. Why? Rather, Ki Chai Hashem, rather, as Hashem lives, Asher ha'elah as Bnei Yisrael me'eretz tzafon, who brought the children of Israel out of the land of the north, umikol ha'aratzos, and from all the lands, Asher hidicham shama, that he pushed them away there, that he exiled them there. V'hashivosim al admasam, and he will bring them back to their land. Sorry, and I will bring them back to their land, Asher nasati la'avosam, that I gave to their fathers. So, in other words, says Jeremiah, that when the future redemption comes, it will be so grand that the reference to God as the Redeemer of Israel will no longer center around the redemption of Egypt like it did in the past, but rather it will now center around the future redemption of the Jewish people when Mashiach comes. So how in this, now these are somewhat parallel prophecies between Isaiah 43 and Jeremiah 16. I just want to know, how in the world is this meant to convey anything about Christianity? Now, I suppose you could say whatever you want, but to me, there's nothing there about, if anything, this is a refutation of that, because it tells you that God is going to redeem the Jewish people. And in other words, all it does is confirm everything that's stated in the Torah and the prophets, consistent with Judaism, that we're in exile in the present, but God is going to bring us out with great wonders and manifest miracles at a future time, and all the prophecies will be fulfilled. So it's in no way saying forget what's in the past. I have like a new thing. I'm done with the Jews. They messed up. They, you know, I'm done with them. And now I'm going to do something totally new. I'm starting over. No more Jewish people, new covenant, Christians, Christianity, the new Israel. That's what I'm going to do now. Doesn't say that at all. It says the reference to forget about what was before means the miracles of the Exodus will pale in comparison to the miracles of the future redemption, such that it will be as though it's forgotten. Because I'm making something happen. I'm going to redeem my people. I haven't abandoned my people. I'll never abandon my people. I am redeeming them right now. To me, it's very clear. Again, to me, I'm saying to me, you don't have to be me, but it's like people have said in the past, not my original thing, but you have to like paint Jesus onto your glasses and then you'll see him in those passages, but that's the only way. How else do you get from there to Jesus? I don't know. So now I want to hear a response.
I was just gonna say, I remember being in church and they would take like, verse 18 and they would just quickly read it, and then something from the New Testament then that would sort of hold that statement up. But I remember, like, if there was like a footnote, I would go back and I would read the whole chapter, and I would be like, that's not what it says, and everybody would shush me, and they'd be like, just pay attention, and I'd always, that's not what it says.
It's all misdirection. It's like Penn and Teller, you know what I mean? Like, it's all misdirection. Look over here, looking over here, and you don't see the chicanery behind the back because they're showing you what they want you to see, but not what they don't want you to see. It's a big misdirect. So you're right. I think it's transparent.
I think it's also, as you said, it's the Jesus colored glasses. You can look at that. I mean, I used to be convinced of that. You would look at it and think, oh, that's absolutely what it means. Absolutely, it means him. And the redemption of the Jewish people is only through the J-man. And so really, unless they're prepared to take their glasses off, they're actually not going to see it any other way. And regardless of how I could explain it, if I had your gift of explaining, I really don't think this particular friend that I have in mind, I really don't think she would listen to me anyway, because she only sees it one way.
Yeah, that, you can't, it's not worth it. It's not worth arguing with people who, like Tim said, the circular reasoning of, the story of, the guy who comes to the psychiatrist and he says, I believe I'm a corpse. And the psychiatrist says, like, you're not a corpse. He says, no, I'm a corpse. I'm 100% convinced that I'm a corpse. He said, is there anything that could convince you that you're not a corpse? He says, I don't know. So the doctor says, well, let me ask you this question. Does a corpse bleed? And the guy says, no, a corpse doesn't bleed. There's no pulse, there's no heartbeat. Corpse doesn't bleed. So he says, okay, so if I cut you and you bleed, would you agree that you're not a corpse? And he says, yeah, but I'm telling you, if you cut me, I'm not going to bleed. He says, okay, so if I cut you and you don't bleed, I'll agree with you that you're a corpse. And if I cut you and you bleed, you'll believe me that you're not a corpse. He says, yeah. Because everybody knows a corpse doesn't bleed. So the guy takes out his little X-Acto knife and cuts the guy, gives him a little cut. And all of a sudden, the guy starts bleeding. And he looks at it and he goes, what do you know? Corpses do bleed. Okay? So that's the way it works. If you're convinced you're a corpse, there's no fact that's going to convince you it's not. It's just, I thought corpses don't bleed, but now that I see that I bleed, it must be the corpses do bleed. So you read the scriptures the same way, that like what a priori, if I would have set a certain standard for what could disprove your idea, you might agree to it. But then once you see the verse, like, no, what the verse means is, and then you try to reverse engineer it so it fits your original idea.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you.
So you can't really break out of that. You can't really break out of that. I mean, some people do break out of it, but it doesn't just come. You know what I mean? It takes a lot.
Yeah.
So now I thought you were gonna say something. I see there's like a billion comments in the comments right now from a guy, Yeshua Mashiach Line of Yehuda, who commented on one of my YouTube videos earlier today. It seems he's following a little bit. I don't know what he's saying. Maybe I'll get to his comments, but I was expecting a little bit of a fiercer counter argument. Okay, I'm curious if Yeshua HaMashiach over there in the comments is offering it, but we'll look. But first, let's see. Golden Gun says Christians may see it as messianic and the word new and go on about their new covenant nonsense. Right. Once you believe in the New Testament and you see the word new in the Old Testament, you go, oh, you see, New Testament says new. What else could it be referring to? But there's nothing to back up their New Testament ideas, right? It's sort of a circular way of thinking. Is it possible that the water in the desert could also be a reference to the water that flowed from the rock? Well, he talks about making a path through the sea. So, but when he's going to make rivers flow in the desert, was that a reference to that fact that he did so originally? And the answer is, I believe yes. In other words, we typically don't think of it that way when we think of the miracle of the rock. And, Moses hit the rock and the water came out and they drank from it. But if you look at the classic kind of Jewish depictions of this, you see actually that a river flows and surrounds the entire camp of the Jewish people. Now, the traditional understanding of the water that came forth from the rock was that this rock, the well of the rock, was with them throughout the desert, and everywhere they encamped, it would sprout a spring that would kind of create a flow of water around the whole camp, that the 12 tribes could always have drinking water. So this verse does align with that imagery, and I'm almost tempted to believe that, without having looked it up beforehand, that probably the origin of that image is likely to be a midrash that draws on this passage in Isaiah to indicate something reflective of the miracles of the Exodus, and draw a picture of the miracles of the Exodus based on this passage, which compares the future miracles to the miracles of the Exodus. So I think that is a very good possibility. Okay, so now we have this guy. Hopefully his comments are not too offensive. Rabbi, you're not telling the truth, beloved. Oh, you're so sweet. Whenever he slaps me with one hand and kisses me on the other side, right? Isaiah 43:19. Behold, I'm doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I'll make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. Yeah, we just read that. Although it wasn't a question. Will you perceive it? Do you perceive it? Is that what you said? The verse says, no, it says, halo te'da'uha. Halo te'da'uha. Yeah, could be read as a question. Halo could be read as, do you not know it? Right? Okay, fine. I'm wondering what point you're making with that. Okay, behold, I'm doing a new thing. Yeah, I just read that. Wait, is this just the same comment over and over? Oh, you're spamming. He's spamming. Since you are precious and honored in my sight, because I love you, I'll give people in exchange for you, nations in exchange for your life. Is that like a New Testament thing? I have no idea what he's saying right now. He lost me. Oh, so I missed a comment from Trey Bishop. He said, I never heard that thing about forgetting the Old Testament. I always heard it was about not dwelling on past mistakes, forgive and move on. Again, even that is maybe a homily, but if the verse in context is referring to the Exodus of Egypt, and forget it because the future Exodus will make it pale. Okay, let's see. You are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, so may know and believe me and understand that I am He. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I love this verse. We the Jew, we're the witnesses. You should be believing what we say because we're the witnesses. We were there. Nobody else was there. Hello, we were there. Let me tell you something about we were there. Let me tell you something. I was going to talk about this, but I got a beautiful question in the beginning of the broadcast, so I went over that. So I happened to my daughter, a couple of my daughters in the past year had an assignment in school to do a family tree project. Okay. And they, call me up and they're like, okay, can you, because I had one daughter in Israel and one daughter in Florida. And, so they call me up and they say, can you, give us information about the family? I want to make a family tree. I'm like, listen, I know my grandparents, my great grandparents. I don't really know much beyond that. I'll have to talk to my father's not living to tell me much anymore. My mother's living. She knows a little bit. I'm asking whatever. So I go down a rabbit hole. I start researching genealogy. I go on jewishgen.org to look up my family. And I go, believe it or not, to the familysearch.org, which is a website that's owned by the Mormon Church. For some reason has insane genealogical records from internet, all over the place. I could look up my family there also, because it goes back to Russia and they have all these old Russian records for some weird reason. And I'm going, and I realize there's a limit to what I can do without more resources. But if you go to ancestry.com, they have access to like way more stuff that, but it's behind a paywall. And, I'm a rabbi. I'm not a congregational rabbi. I'm a teacher. Just a little secret. I don't make big bucks. Okay. I hope every month I can pay my rent and utilities and put food on the table is my goal. And if I could do that month to month, it's a miracle. So I can't afford a subscription to ancestry.com. So I put it on my wish list. People ask me, what do you want for a Hanukkah present? I was like, I want a subscription to ancestry.com. So my mother, God bless her, she says, what would you like for Hanukkah? I said, I wanted a subscription to ancestry.com. And they're having a sale, whatever it was, 30% off for if you buy a 6-month thing. So she buys it for me. So I go on ancestry.com and then I start having fun because I'm putting in the data points that I know, and it has all this data in its database, and it's as an algorithm, and it's computing, and it's correlating. It says, oh, this person who lived in this place, his parents are these ones, and it finds you all the relevant documents about all these people. So I go from my great grandparents to great great to great great great. Okay, so I'll tell you a little something about me. So my grandmother's maiden name was Lieberman. Now, Lieberman is a very common name, but I found her parents and her father's parents, and her father's parents were immigrants. He was from Switzerland and she was from Germany. And his name was Lieberman and her name was Weil, W-E-I-L, Weil. So I put her in. This is a crazy story, okay? Because when my grandmother passed away, we needed to figure out her Hebrew name so we could put it on her tombstone. And she went by her English name, which was Natalie Sarah. Okay. And I remembered when she was living, she once told me her Hebrew name was Surah Nessa. Okay. But we didn't know her father's name. Her father was known as Charles. He went by Charles. We didn't know his Hebrew name. So listen to this crazy story. So my mother and I were on this Sherlock Holmes detective mission to find out her father's name, because you write on the tombstone, you know, it would be her Hebrew name, daughter of his Hebrew name. And everybody knew him as Charles. Nobody knew his Hebrew name. No one remembered it that was living. So, so what happened was that we find where he's buried, and we go to the cemetery, and typically on a Jewish tombstone, you're going to have the Hebrew name. And we're shocked to find that his tombstone does not have a Hebrew name on it, which means he was, as my mother recalls, he was a very assimilated German Jew. The German Jews became very assimilated in the, 19th century. So his family was very assimilated. He didn't even put his own Hebrew. He didn't put it. His family didn't put his Hebrew name on his tombstone. Okay, wow. So we're like, what could his name be? So I realized, listen, my uncle is Charles, and he's named for this my mother, his grandfather, right? My great grandfather, Charles Lieberman, and his Hebrew name is Zelig or Zelig, right? Zelig. So we're like, okay, he's Charles and he's Zelig. So my great grandfather must have been Zelig. So we go with the name Surah Surah is it's a alternate pronunciation of like Sarah. She was Natalie Sarah, right? Surah Nessa. So it was going to be Sarah Nessa Bas, daughter of Zelig. That's what we were going to put. And then my mother, going through her mother's papers, finds, this is years ago. This story goes back to like 2008, okay? Something around then. She finds, I'm gonna tell you why I'm telling you this story. The kesuva, the marriage document, the Jewish marriage document of her mother, where it has her name with her father's name. And there her name is written Sarah Nessie Bas, daughter of Pinchas. Pinchas is a biblical name. It's a common Jewish name, which is Phineas in English for whatever reason. So Sarah Nessie Bas Pinchas. So now we're scratching our heads. We go, what? Pinchas? Charles Lieberman was Pinchas? So who's Zelig? Why is my uncle Charles Zelig if his grandfather Charles was Pinchas? Like, no explanation, right? But well, listen, we were only surmising that his name was Zelig, but if you have a legal document, the legal document wins. So we're like, okay, his name was Pinchas, and her name was Nessa. Like she said, it was Nessie. In other words, that maybe Nessa was a nickname. Nessie, fine. Sarah Nessie Bas Pinchas. We put that on the gravestone. That's what happens. Now, this has been a mystery for 16 years. Why was his name Pinchas and my uncle Charles is Zelig? Who is Zelig? Who is Zelig? Where did this name come from? It's a common name. It's a Yiddish name, which is really a German name ultimately. A lot of Jews have the name Zelig. But why is he Zelig and he's named for a guy? Doesn't make sense. Fine. Anyway, I'm on Ancestry.com just a couple weeks ago. And I'm putting in, and it finds my great-grandparents and so it turns out my great-great-grandparents that, like, even my mother didn't know this, was a fella named Max Lieberman from Switzerland who married a girl named Sarah Weil from Germany. Now, I put Sarah Weil in, and Ancestry.com just lights up. Boom! Something happened. I was like, we would like to suggest a father for Sarah Weil. And I'm like, okay. And it suggests her father's name was a fellow named Seligman Weil. Seligman is Zelig. Now we know where the name came from. It was Charles's grandfather. Charles's grandfather was Zelig. Oh, gets better. So I put this guy in the family tree because the name fits and all the facts are matching according to Ancestry.com's, algorithm. And then it finds me more documents for this guy, Seligman Weil. And I'm going through the documents and I find that one of them has his Hebrew name because Seligman was his German name. Guess what his Hebrew name was? Can anybody guess?
Pinchas.
Pinchas. Seligman, Zelig, was Pinchas. It was the same person. So he was the grandfather of Charles Pinchas Lieberman, who was the grandfather of my uncle Charles Zelig. So really, Zelig and Pinchas are named for the same person, and therefore Charles and Charles. So everything just converged, okay? But once I had that data point that this guy Seligman was my great-great-great-grandfather, so Ancestry.com starts giving me even more information. And suddenly this family line is linked to a very famous German Jewish family with the last name Weil. And it starts taking me back to the 1800s, to the 1700s, to the 1600s. And I'm going back in time to a dynasty of a very famous rabbinic family. That from this family, probably no one in this broadcast knows what I'm talking about, but a very famous work, rabbinic work known as the Korban Nesanel, written by Rabbi Nesanel and Nathaniel Weil, is in this lineage, which goes back further to a 15th century rabbi, very famous rabbi, who was among the Tosafists. If you guys know who the Tosafists are, actually, I'm not sure if he was one of the Tosafists, but he was a medieval rabbi from the era of the Rishonim. If anyone knows, from the era of the Rishonim and the medieval rabbis, whose name was Rabbi Jacob Weil, also known as the Mahari Weil. The Mahari Weil, or Jacob Weil, is the progenitor of the famous Weil rabbinic dynasty that includes the Korban Nesanel, who was 17th or 18th century, and is an ancestor of my great-great-grandmother, which makes him my ancestor. And then I started researching this guy, Jacob Weil, and it turns out that he's descended from another very famous 13th century individual who is known as the Maharam of Rothenburg in Germany. Anyone here ever heard the Maharam of Rothenburg? Very famous person. Famously was the leader of German Jewry in the community of Worms, and he was abducted by the German authorities and put in prison, and he wouldn't be released except for a very high ransom. And the Jews collected the ransom, and then the Maharam told them it was forbidden to pay the ransom, because if they paid the ransom, then the government would be encouraged to arrest more Jews so that they would get paid more ransom. So he said, "You can't pay my ransom." He refused to allow them to pay, and he died in prison. And after he died, they wouldn't release the body until they paid the ransom. And the Jews ended up paying the ransom after his death in order to bury him. A very famous individual, the Maharam of Rothenburg. So it turns out that the Maharam of Rothenburg was one of my ancestors. Anyway, that's a long tangent because I just got very excited about this, because these are all discoveries I made, like, more or less since our last broadcast. So that I have very prestigious lineage. Now, but so I'm trying to make a point to this troll in the comments, whom I love. All my love to you. That you are my witnesses. We were there, okay? Nobody else was there. We were there. We were in Egypt. We were there at the splitting of the sea. We were at Mount Sinai. We were in the land of Israel. Through the Babylonian exile and the return and the Second Temple period and the Roman exile, and we know who we are, okay? So when you say you are my witnesses, yeah, listen to Isaiah. He says, listen to the Jewish people. They're the ones who are going to witness about who God is and who God isn't. So listen to your own advice. Read Isaiah, and it couldn't be more clear. Okay. So I don't know if you enjoyed that really long tangent, But I see this guy is throwing lots more citations into the thing, but whatever. This is very textbook missionary stuff. They always quote these verses to try to prove something, and if you actually study them, you realize it has nothing to do with that.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
sorry. There's another, using Isaiah again, there's a how the Christians always use it to talk about the servant. But if you look at Isaiah, I think it's 42, I may be wrong, but it's where he says, "You are my witnesses," plural, "my servant,
Yes.
whom I have chosen," because the Israel is looked at as one, even though it's many people. Israel is one. It's like the 70 soul. I believe soul is singular of the 70 that go down to Egypt. So while the Christian argument is who the servant singular must be, that's not how it is in Judaism.
Right. So, right. Well, the verse he quoted about "you're my witnesses, my servant," right? So then, then when you go to Isaiah 53 and it talks about the servant, we know who the servant is because Isaiah told us who the servant is. The servant is Israel, right? So all this stuff is very apparent. Boy, there's the comment section is really busy this week.
They're coming up.
Here's another one of these guys with the none of the individuals you mentioned. I didn't mention these. I'm just looking at this comment. According to the biblical account, none of the individuals you mentioned, Noah, Japheth, Gomer, or Ashkenaz, were Israelites. I didn't mention these individuals. What is he talking about? I don't know. I don't know where he's coming from. I don't know. Some people they have their prepared speeches. They're not really listening. Like, the individuals you mentioned. No, I didn't mention that. Was that something you wrote beforehand that you were just waiting to share? Okay. I'm kind of perusing the comments, but as I do, if people want to speak up or in the studio, I'll listen to you first. I'm reading these comments. Nothing too interesting. And here he starts talking about Kezaria, one of these people. Yeah. We dealt with this already. I'm not going back down that road. Do your homework. It's so stupid. Right. Golden Gun, thank you. Don't give us the Khazar stuff. Exactly. And then he's some anti-Zionist thing. And he wants to say that Khazaria is the origin of the Ashkenazi Jews. This has all been thoroughly debunked. There is no serious scholar who takes that seriously. If they would, that in itself would take his credentials and throw it in the garbage, because all the evidence is contrary to that. And anyone who says that is just ignorant or has a very strong agenda. It's not reality. It's fairy tale stuff. I don't know where this guy's going. But Golden Gun's putting up a nice defense. Trey Bishop says these people are bots. Very likely. Yeah, but again, we have a very well documented history that goes all the way back to the Bible. We don't have gaps like all these groups who claim to be the Israelites. They just wake up one day and go, you know what? We think that we're actually the descendants of this tribe, that tribe. We didn't have that like wake up moment of, oh, you know what? Maybe we're Jewish. It's like there's a continuous chain that's just been ongoing. I always make the point to my kids every year when we sit down at the Passover Seder and we tell the story of the Exodus. I said, you're sitting at this Passover Seder. I sat at my parents' Passover Seder. They sat at their parents' Passover Seder. And in every Jewish home on earth at this moment, or in their respective time zones, in this relative moment, every Jewish family is doing the exact same thing. They're telling their children the story of the Exodus, which was shared with them by their parents and their parents from their parents. And there's an unbroken chain of that happening. We've been, just as the Bible says, "V'higata levincha," you will tell your child on that day, that every year when Passover comes around, the Bible commands the parents to tell the children what happened that day. That communication is an unbroken chain that's occurred every year without interruption from the time of the Exodus. So, Atem Eda, you are my witnesses. We were there. We were there. And we testified to our children, who testified to their children, to our parents, to us. Stop with the Khazar stuff. Stop with the Black Hebrew Israelite stuff. It's all nonsense. Stop with the Ashkenazim aren't real Jews. It's nonsense. There's no point in history that you could find, I challenge you, where where are the Jews? Where are they? They just pop up out of nowhere. Who came before them? Who were their parents? Who were their teachers? Right? We have an unbroken documented history. I'm not claiming that every person has an intact family tree that traces every individual between them and, let's say, the generation of the Exodus, or even the generation of the exile. But we know who the prominent Jews of that time were. We know who the prominent rabbinic leaders of those times were, and who their students were, and who their students were, and who their students were. There's a clear chain of transmission from teacher to student that's literally unbroken, that spans every community and every exile and branches back to one original community of people. There was a little bit of a project done in my school, or for my son's class, actually, where the history teacher said, I bet I could trace every single one of your fathers back to a certain great rabbi of yesteryear. He said, tell me what yeshiva, what school of rabbinic study your father studied at, and I'll tell you his connection to this great rabbi of yore. Because it turns out that once you know the institution and who the rabbinic leader of that institution was, there's a very strong record of where each leader studied and who they studied under, who they were disciple from, and who those rabbis were disciples from. And most of today's contemporary scholarship goes back to a particular school of scholarship that just about everybody could be traced to. So, we have all this information, and from there you could trace it up back to even earlier institutions and earlier individuals and earlier sages. There really is no interruption. So this whole revisionist history of trying to delegitimize contemporary Jews as somehow not being connected to the people of the book, it's just there's no legs for it to stand on. It's floating in the air on castles made out of cotton candy. Cotton candy. Okay. Someone sent me a private message. I should translate Isaiah 43:1 for Trey Bishop. Now I am past the hour, so I am past the hour. So, here he says, I could trace to the Vilna Gaon. I think that's what the history teacher wanted to say. The Vilna Gaon, who was active in the 18th century, was an individual who he wanted to say he could trace every student in his class from their fathers back to the Vilna Gaon as far as Torah, the transmission of Torah knowledge. Someone says, can I ask a question? You can, but now the hour's late, so I really probably can't answer any more questions. So I would invite people who want to ask me questions to email me, rabbi@rabbirafimollot.com. I'm famously not great about answering emails because I am super busy, but I try. So it's better. It's worth a shot. It's better than nothing. Okay, I like Trey Bishop's answer. Someone was saying, "Can I make good people can I make bad people good?" And Trey says, "It's good that you want to, but the easiest thing to do is work on the self." And I somewhat agree. Is there a way to trace back specifically Levium from present to as far up as I can go? So again, my Virtualizer. I went to yeshiva with a guy, Virtualizer. You know that? I don't remember his first name, but your last name is as interesting a last name as it is. I recognize it because I was actually in yeshiva with a Virtualizer, as it turns out. So Rabbi at Rabbi Rafi Mollot, and you have to spell it right. So it's spelled just like my channel name. You look at my channel name, and you'll find the at Rabbi at RabbiRafiMollot.com. So is there a way? So I would say, again, I would recommend jewishgen.org is a free resource. It's a little difficult to navigate, but you can get a lot of information there if you know how to utilize the site, which I don't claim to really well. But even before I bought a account on Ancestry.com, I was able to trace back to like my great grandfather with ancestry on my father's side, meaning Mollot, my last name Mollot, Mollot, which in Russia was originally Molot with one L. I could trace back to Minsk, back to the 1700s for free. Okay. But if you your better bet is to, if you get one of these paid accounts for Ancestry.com, there's a basic level, which is $20 a month. I feel like a salesman. I'm just telling you what it is, where you get access to like US documents. But if you want access to foreign documents, what's called the World Explorer tier, see, I had to go through this. It's like another $20 a month. So you pay like $40 a month. And then you get much more information. I think I got luck. Like, I think I hit the jackpot. That I happen to have an ancestor who is linked to a well-researched, famous genealogy that once I got that person, like all the work was done. It was just like the highway opens up and you just go on a straight road back to yesteryear. Once I hit that, it was a jackpot. You might hit a jackpot, if you go back with your ancestors. My wife is a descendant from Soloveitchik, so that was also like a jackpot. I'm back to the 1500s, researching the Soloveitchik line, for those who know Soloveitchik. So sometimes you hit the jackpot. It's the best I could tell you. If you want to hire a professional genealogist, it's going to cost you somewhere in the realm of like $5,000 to privately hire a genealogist to do the work for you. So they could probably do better than you could do even with Ancestry.com, but somewhere in between, you pay some money for Ancestry.com or myheritage.org, and you could discover a lot, and you might hit the jackpot of these lineages. Someone is joining the stream now, but I just have to end the stream. So I appreciate everyone being here. Next week, big announcement. Next week, we're going to start, God willing, our new series on the minor prophets. Now, we were talking the last week what we would study, and there were many votes for many different things, but the ultimate winner was the minor prophets. My plan is to start with Obadiah, because it is one chapter, and I'm going to go in that order, not in the order the books appear in the Tanakh, but rather the order of just going from smallest to biggest, because I think it'll just be easiest that way. So otherwise, we'd start from Hosea, which is 14 chapters, and that's probably the longest book we've done. That would be the longest book by far that we've done on this channel. So I want to start small, and then we'll get more ambitious over time. So appreciate everyone being here.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Great questions.
We'll do some study. No, I appreciate it. Now, I thought, Abigail, that your counter argument to me was going to be from the following verses, and now you're going to accuse me of hiding the ball. And because we got sidetracked, I didn't have a chance to discuss it. But we could. But I'm going to show you that I'm not hiding the ball, because I'm going to show you the ball, and then I'm going to leave you with a question. I'm going to leave you with a question. In other words, I don't have time to answer it. But if we go back to Isaiah, okay, and let's take a look over there. We ended off, here's the text break at 21. But if you go to 22, it says, but you have not worshipped me, O Jacob, that you should be wary of me, O Israel. Again, I'm using the bad translation, but more or less, right? You have not brought me your sheep for burnt offerings, nor honored me with your sacrifices. I have not burdened you with grain offerings, nor wearied you about frankincense. You have not brought me fragrant reed with money, nor sated me with the fat of your sacrifices. Instead, you've burdened me with your sins. You've wearied me with your iniquities. Okay, so then it goes on to say, Israel, you're such a lousy servant. But then it goes on to say, it is I who for my own sake wipe your transgressions away and remember your sins no more. So again, even though Isaiah then goes on to criticize Israel for their shortcomings, but then it follows with God's promise of forgiveness for his sake. Okay. Okay, so then it ends off like this. So I profane the holy princes, I abandoned Jacob to proscription and Israel to mockery. And it seems to be the end of chapter 44. So that seems like a very negative ending. So if we would have ended there, and then be like, oh, Christians must be right, because God says the Jews are no good. Okay, Christians, right? But first of all, just read the passages before where God says, I'm going to redeem you. Even in the middle of this passage, it says, I'm going to wipe away your iniquity. But you'll notice that there's some text that follows. It says, but hear now, O Jacob, my servant, Israel, whom I have chosen. Thus said your maker, your creator has helped you since birth. Fear not, my servant Jacob, you sure whom I have chosen. Even as I pour water on thirsty soil and I rain upon dry ground, so I'll pour my spirit upon your offspring, my blessing upon your posterity. So even after the criticism, they shall sprout like grass, like willows by the watercourses. One shall say, I am God's. Another shall use the name of Jacob. Another shall mark his arm of God and adopt the name of Israel. Okay, we will have to reckon with these verses. But what I want to bring out, I'm the first, I'm the last. All these verses are like a total refutation of Christianity. But what I want to bring out is that even if you point to the verses that follow where there's a criticism of Israel, you still have to continue reading to see that God is promising Israel that there will be a redemption in the future. They were despite the low periods in the history of Israel, there will again be a high. And we saw that in Shir HaShirim a lot. For those who were in that series of Song of Songs, there was the ups and downs in the relationship. And remember that Rashi says that the Song of Songs is like a summary of the whole Tanakh. It's the whole Tanakh weaved into one song. So here's where you see some of the reflections of that, the ups and downs. But ultimately, we're in a relationship like any marriage. There are ups and downs. But the end of the story is a happy ending. So I think that's the main thing to bring out. You can't just hyper focus on one passage without reading the whole book. You can't just read chapter 44 if you didn't start from chapter 1 and finish with chapter 66. You know what I'm saying? You got to read the whole story. Fine. That's it. That's my message.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everybody, where'd I go? Everybody have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next week, God willing.
Thank you, Rabbi.
See you in touch. Bye-bye.